Hello, everyone, and welcome to Why We Burn Ourselves, how to change the self-sabotage habits that affect our physical, mental, and spiritual health. Here at the Seed of Life Alternative Health Collective in Charleston, South Carolina. So this is a Zoom webinar series. We've got 3 series in this one, so 3 little segments. And today we'll be doing a little bit of a review of what we went over last time. You can still purchase the entire series on our website at www.seedoflifecollective.com. And I will send you our recorded sessions of the previous webinars. So without further ado, it's about 6:01. We're going to give it just a couple more minutes to get everybody on, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. So get out your notebooks, your pens, find a quiet space, and let's really center in on this whole self-sabotage thing that we all do to ourselves. And it's how we are affecting our physical, mental, and spiritual potential in this lifetime, as well as our health. So if you can just take a moment to clear this space and really allow yourself to be honest with what you're really bringing to the table when it comes to your own life and what you want it to be and what you want it to look like. All right. So welcome to all the self-saboteurs, because we're all here together. Let's try that again. It's the funny thing about Zoom, you never know if it's going to participate with you completely. Maybe it's got its own little self-sabotage. Yay! We're all here together to change, because we all do this. So those of you guys that are new to Zoom, let's just go over some logistics of this webinar. Welcome to Zoom. It is a free platform that you can use to record your own webinars, your own videos. You can also just record them for yourself, or you can send them to other media. They do put everything on an MP3 player for you, or an MP4, I guess. So first thing is, can you hear me? If not, check the volume on your device. Can you see this screen? That is step number 1 of this webinar. You gotta be able to see it, you wanna be able to hear it. If not, go to chat under participants in the right top corner and type me a message. So under participants, you guys would have this a little bit differently, but it'll say participants, and you're just gonna drop down and there's a chat. You also want to make sure that you know if you're muted or not, because if you're not, I can hear everything that's going on, and so can everyone else. I will mute everyone until we finish the presentation, and then we'll have a question and answer at the end. So there's also a raise your hand option under the more ... button. And that will help you. If you do have a question throughout it, I typically will ask for people to just save their questions to the Q&A, so write it down. But if there's, for any reason, a clarification question that we need to hit, hey, I can't see anything, hey, I lost the audio feed or whatever, just raise your hand and I will get to that, or you can go through the chat. And anything else, I do have my cell phone on me, and it's the number listed there, so you can text me and I'll get your message. So without further ado, this is Why We Burn Ourselves, segment 2 of the series. And last time we went over what is self-sabotage, what are the identifiers, and how do we know when we're doing this? And then what are our patterns of destruction? Because we want to know those 3, right? We want to know what is it, how do we do it, and what does it look like? Because that's going to really help us identify how to get to the bottom of it and when we can shift. So today's new material is how we sabotage our existence, our physiology, and our health. So last time we definitely just kind of did a general basis. We did a little bit with when we cause fights, when we have disagreements, maybe some patterns that you see in yourself. And today we're actually going to move into a different segment of it, which is how we are sabotaging our own bodies and our own life, our own longevity. This presentation is recorded, and you will receive a recording once we are done. So who am I? Well, I am Melody Rogers, and there is my beautiful face. I'm an Ayurvedic educator, a yoga healer, certified pro healer, so that's through yogahealer.com, hair, skin, body therapist, a yoga instructor, and a fitness professional. So over my, I guess we're at 17 years now in these different fields, I've worked with a lot of people doing a lot of different things. And whether it was changing their image or changing how their physiology looks on the outside or changing the way their body mechanics work, or even now into how they relate to the rest of the world and the people around them in their relationships, I've seen these patterns over and over and over again to the point where I've worked on identifying them myself. And as much as I would say you get proficient at it and you can really make a shift and a change, it still takes a lot of work because these are very ingrained habits for all of us. And we're going to talk about where those habits come from and how to identify them. But of course, the work is within ourselves, right? The work is the practice. It's all in the practice, whether it's yoga or fitness or skincare or hair care. It's what you do with it. It's how often you're coming to that table and really being conscious of, like, what do I want? What am I willing to do about it? What do I need to change? Right? So, question number 1, what is self-sabotage? So we went over this last week, and we're just going to tap into this one more time. So self-sabotage is a cycle, a pattern of self-destructive actions, emotions, and mental constraints that we enact based on the glass ceiling parameters we perceive as true. So some things to take from this are it's a pattern, it's a cycle, it's a repetition of self-destruction that typically begins with these mental constraints based off of the ideas of others that we'll talk about in a minute, followed by emotions that are attached to these mental constraints. And then, of course, the actions that follow. Now, the thoughts that come in, sometimes the thoughts are unconscious. Sometimes the actions just happen all of a sudden. But those actions are always tied to the emotions, and the emotions are always tied to the mental constraints. So how does this affect our existence? Well, it affects our personal success and our personal growth. Any connected relationships that we would have, our mental state, and our life potential. So when we're talking about our existence, we're not only talking about how long are we going to be on this planet and what type of existence are we actually going to have on it, but we're also talking about that from the mental attributes as well as the spiritual. So this self-sabotaging, in a lot of ways, is, I kind of think of it like kind of like a curse that we've placed on ourselves that we can lift at any time. But a lot of it is trying to figure out, what is the curse and where does it show up? Because just like you can have a curse on you and you really just don't know when it's, oh, is this it? Is this it? Is this it? We placed it upon ourselves. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But it does limit how we exist with others, with this planet, with ourselves, with our future, our past, and our present. And in figuring this whole thing out, like, how do I change this self-sabotaging habit? I can actually define my own personal success, my personal growth, how connected my relationships are, what is my mental state, and really, truly, what is my life potential? So the glass ceiling, how far we can go or how high we can rise based on the expectations of others that have been bestowed on us about our personal abilities and worth, or the stories that we tell ourselves why we cannot have what we desire. Why we cannot have what we desire. And Kate Stillman talks about this, who is the owner of Yoga Healer, about what is desire. It's really the drive. It's really a motivator. So what you truly desire, might seem small in a moment, but it might also seem really huge. Like, I desire $1 million, or I desire a fantastic life, or I desire a love that is amazing. Why can't I have these things? Well, there's a story behind it. And Gay Hendricks calls it the glass ceiling, or you can see beyond it, but you can't get past it. You just keep bumping into it. I like to think of Willy Wonka, the first movie, when Charlie and his grandfather are floating and they're getting closer to this fan and they can see it and it's coming closer, and then they're trying to find their way out of it because they know they can't touch it, but they don't really know what that fan is for, right? You don't know how high you can fly until you start flying. And the biggest thing about this glass ceiling to remember is that these are mistruths. These are misbeliefs about our potential. They are not true. They are the curse that we have placed on ourselves that we can lift at any point in time. So where do they come from? Where do these mistruths come from? Where does this whole remnants of a curse come from? The stories of our past. Those that we've learned our potential from. And those people might be our parents or our grandparents, depending on our relationships in the past. Any guardians that we may have had, even the babysitter can help do this. Any teacher, teachers galore. Those that we admired. And keep in mind, the past can be childhood, or the past can be last year. Those that we loved, especially those very first relationships that, tugged at our core of heartstrings and shaped us. And those we sought approval from. And that can be anyone at any time. It can even be ourselves. Now, examples that I've seen over the years, especially in my health coaching, about these self-sabotage stories, they show up most commonly as, I'm not good enough. I'm just not. I just don't have it. I don't have it in me. I'm not good enough for this relationship or this person, for this job, this life. I'm not good enough to win. A lot of times you'll hear that in kids in sports teams. I'm not good enough to thrive. I'm good enough to exist. I'm good enough to be okay, but I'm not good enough to have a vibrant, amazing life. And I've seen it lead all the way down the path of, I'm not good enough to live. I'm too much of a burden. I have too many problems, and maybe life just isn't for me. This is one I hear a lot from the hair, skin, and body segment of my experience, my career. I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not strong enough. I can't do this. I don't have what it takes to make it through this. I'm not talented enough. It's bigger than what I can do. And inevitably, there's something wrong with me. At some points we get to, there's something wrong with you. But this self-sabotaging, it always comes back to, there's inevitably something wrong with me. Now, how does this affect our existence? Last week we talked about how it affects our relationships, how it affects the way we react to things, our natural tendencies. And today we're going to talk specifically about our existence, our health, our longevity, our physiology. How does it affect my body chemistry? Well, it shows up as pain, stress, disconnection, blame, personal suffering. So take a moment. Is any of this happening to you? Do you have any pain in your body, in your physiology, in your mind, in your life? What about stress? Stress causes a lot of problems. Disconnection. Are you noticing yourself disconnecting from yourself, from others, maybe even from reality sometimes? Blame. Do you find yourself blaming? And personal suffering. And that can mean anything. It can mean misery. It can mean dysfunction. It can mean, pessimism of the whole entire world, arguing, not being exactly where you want to be. And when we talk about existence, today we're going to talk about 4 vital areas of existence, of healthy existence. And we're going to go over 2 today. Next webinar, we're going to catch the other 2. But I really want to have time to go in depth with some of these. So our first one that we self-sabotage, but our body absolutely needs, is sleep and rest. Food and nutrition. Can't live without it. Movement and growth. And mindfulness and success thinking. Without these, you don't get too far. You can exist, but it will just be an existence. So what are you sabotaging in your existence? So just take a moment. Write these down. Think about, am I self-sabotaging my restfulness, my rejuvenation process, my sleep? Do I see some self-sabotage in what I eat and drink and those habits around that? What about my growth? What about growth in life? Do I feel like I could really be moving more in my life? And do I feel like I'm at my potential of mindfulness? Do I feel successful? And maybe just star any that are big ones for you. If you have any notes on, oh yeah, I do that. Yep, that's a problem. I'm a night owl and I can't get up in the morning and I realize how exhausted I am, or I eat crap like 5 days a week. All right, so let's get started with the first one, sleep and rest. I love this image. As diurnal creatures, which means creatures of the day, that which we have evolved into on this planet, that's where we're at, we follow the cycles of the sun for waking and the moon for sleeping. So rise with the sun, sleep with the moon, if you've been in any of my Ayurvedic immersion classes. This pattern changes seasonally and by time zone, because time zones are always set by the rising of the sun. Seasonally, obviously, because sometimes there's more daytime, sometimes there's more nighttime. But we have been wired with the evolution of our physiology with this planet to move this way, to need to be active when we're awake and need to be resting when we're asleep and rejuvenating. So what are our identifiers that we are sleep deprived, or that we're not in alignment, that we are self-sabotaging our sleep and our rest? Look at the grumpy moon and sun. They're not happy with us. You might notice things like difficulty with attention or alertness, concentration, reasoning. You might need a lot of coffee in the morning. You may need things that have been prescribed to you. You may need help sleeping at night. Well, this can also affect things like problem solving and memory. Not to mention, if you are not functioning, you probably are not interested in sex. A depressed mood, fatigue and insomnia. So insomnia, I found a lot of times in my coaching programs, especially the immersion, that people are chronically in insomnia. All insomnia means is you can't get to sleep and you can't stay asleep. That's all it means. So if you can't get to sleep or stay asleep, you have insomnia. It doesn't mean you just toss and turn all night long. And of course, that will affect your hunger regulation. So in Ayurveda, we call it Tinksha Agni, when the digestive fire is up and down and all over the place. And then there's a slow fire and there's a strong fire, and they can both have their concerns. Now they do change seasonally. So if you're noticing your hunger kind of going up and down and it's not following a pattern, this could definitely be a repercussion of not truly resting. Obesity. A lot of times, sometimes you can also see, an underweight, like people who can't seem to gain weight. But obesity is definitely the one that I see the most, a difficulty losing the weight. High blood pressure, impaired judgment, irritability, mood swings, and lack of following through on projects. So maybe you get overloaded, maybe you take on a lot of things and you can't seem to get yourself on top of them. Food and nutrition. So here's our diurnal friend, the panda, snacking. So diurnal creatures also follow the cycles of the sun for digestion of food, and the moon for digestion of sensory information and thoughts. So just like sleeping and rest, when the sun comes up, we come up. Like our bodies naturally begin to awaken. Your optic nerve, once it taps into a certain amount of light, it starts the waking process. Once you take away a certain amount of light, it starts the resting, rejuvenation process. So our digestive system does the same thing. When the sun is the highest, your bile production is the highest, which helps you break down fat in your diet. It helps you break down heavier foods in your diet. It works whether or not you have a gallbladder. And at night, when the moon cycle is at its highest, sometimes we don't even see the moon, your REM sleep actually is much easier to fall into and has more repetition and frequency. So this pattern also changes seasonally and by the time zones, because again, it's how much sunlight, how much moonlight, and our bodies naturally change to this. Unfortunately, we live in a society where we can create day or night whenever we want to, and we don't have to be part of those cycles. But this is the way we are wired. So this is why knowing this can help you tap into, oh man, I am self-sabotaging my physiology and I didn't even realize it. So identifiers of malnutrition, or a nutrition that's not supporting our physiology. Of the two images, you'll notice the children on the top are obviously not getting enough absorption of their nutrition. And on the children on the bottom, this young lady she's absorbing, who knows what she's absorbing, but she's intaking more than what her body can actually handle. So you'll notice a lot of the same indicators are going to be things like attention, alertness, concentration, reasoning, problem solving, memory. If your body is not getting what it needs, if it's not getting the building blocks to actually create the physiology that you need for your optimal existence, then a lot of these things are going to start going along the wayside. Reproduction is obviously not going to be a big concern if You can't even remember what you were doing a minute ago because your body doesn't have the nutrients that it needs. Again, depressed mood, fatigue, insomnia. This one, uncontrollable hunger, a lot of times is the ones I see. People are not absorbing the foods, and a lot of it is the foods that we're eating don't have the nutrition that we need. And the thing about it is now we know this. You can look up anything. If you learn to read labels and relatively even understand what we're putting on our bodies from shelves, and hasn't even been cooked, and it can be refrigerated forever or never goes bad, then you'll notice uncontrollable hunger and cravings. Obesity or underweight, as you see from the pictures, high or low blood pressure, is the muscles of the heart and the venous systems and arterial systems get affected. Bone instability and frailty, impaired judgment, again, and then also muscular, joint, and neural pain. So if the physiology is not getting what it needs, it's definitely going to show up as pain. And this impact, you'll see things like infections, confusion. It's interesting to see how much of our population is going to the hospital for things that they don't understand. And I'd have to say a lot of it is nutritional. Nutrition can change a lot of what we do. We all know this. We all know this to a certain degree. If you've ever eaten something that makes you feel bad, and then you eat something that makes you feel good. Why do we eat the things that make us feel bad? And why do we continue to eat the things that make us feel bad? So now we're just going to take a few moments to identify anything in your life that you've realized you've self-sabotaged. And today's focus again is food and sleep and rest and nutrition, even hydration, but anything. From what we've talked about just briefly, can you identify anything that you yourself have self-sabotaged in your life? And here's your guidelines. If it didn't turn out the way you wanted, you pushed away from it. It was their fault, whoever they may be. And it always happens this way. These are some clues that this is something I'm self-sabotaging. I'm always tired. I'm always hungry. I can't ever lose weight. I always get into this fight with this person. Traffic always hates me. Whatever it is. So I'm just going to have everybody just take a few minutes to just write down, jot down, or if you're driving, think about where is some place that I've self-sabotaged, so we can get to the bottom of it today. And now that you've identified where are some places you may have self-sabotage, how did you do that? What did your pattern look like? What is the reoccurring cycle that you go through that you realize, oh yeah, I do this every time. I know when this happens, and I know better, but I still do it. That's what I mean. That's what self-sabotage is. So identifying your how, what does it look like? Maybe just jot a few notes about that. And then maybe going into the why. Where did that come from? So identifying that limiting belief, that mistruth, that glass ceiling. Why did I do it? I know it's not good for me. I know it's not helping me with my existence. I know it's not giving me the life I want. Why? What is the story I'm telling myself? And finally, what is the truth about this story? What is your truth? You can realize where it came from, what you do, and what it is. Can you also realize what is not true and what is true? And this is a great exercise to keep for your references as we go through these series. And also, if you find yourself in a spot where you don't know one of the answers, I encourage you to reach out, email me, or reach out for a free session, and let's figure out what we can change. So next we're going to talk about the ick factor. Last week, we discussed this a little bit. So what is the ick factor? It's an identifier when our self-sabotage habit is arising. What does the ick factor feel like? This is, of course, a melody word, the ick factor. It feels icky. It does not feel good. It's the opposite of good. But it can feel familiar because it's happened before. It's happened probably many times over. It can be unexplainable, where you just feel like, oh, this is just me. This is just what I do. This is just who I am. It can also feel destructive and out of control, and you just can't get on top of it. You don't know how to change it. You know it's terrible. You know it's icky, but you don't know how to change it. And sometimes it's just completely unconscious. Remember how we talked about the mental constraints lead to the emotions, which then can lead to the actions before there's ever any thoughts involved. When you feel that icky, like, oh, I'm about to get mad, I'm about to get irritated, I'm starting to feel disconnected and I don't want to be here. Is it what you want? Does it get you closer to what you want? And if it does not, then how do we change it? How do we change the way we feel about this? Well, when we identify these self-sabotage habits and we make this shift, this conscious shift, which we'll talk about in a minute, there's a feeling of freedom. You'll feel your chest open up and you feel your throat open up and you just think, oh my gosh, yeah, this is what I need to be doing. It can feel really new, or it can remind you of good memories. It can remind you of something that you're like, oh yeah, I remember that part of me that was pure and innocent before the glass ceiling, before someone gave me this idea about myself that is not true, before I passed down the curse. It can also feel out of your norm. I especially see this with food choices. When people realize, hey, this is not the nutrition that is giving me, like, supporting my physiology. It's not supporting what I want. It's not making me feel good, but it doesn't feel normal either because I've never done it. Or maybe I did it when, I was more in touch with my body, or maybe I did it at a time that I was going through a lot of suffering. Like it doesn't feel normal. And it can also feel really hard and sacrificing. Why do I have to give up chocolate cake for carrots? Well, maybe you don't. Maybe carrots aren't what support your physiology, because what you really want is something that feels good, but feels good ultimately, not feels good in this moment and then you feel terrible later. You want something that feels good and good and good and good and good. And it will always be consciously driven. Like, this is that moment where we go from this untrue mental constraint to these terrible emotions that come with it to this action that we've done a million times over, it's kind of like stopping the process and saying, wait, this is what I've always done, and these are the results I've always gotten. What can I do differently? What do I know is true about myself? What do I know supports my physiology? When do I need to go to bed? Now, how do we reframe, sorry. Well, how do we reframe? How do we reframe this whole image? And I like to start with the 4 steps to appraisal and change. So go back to that little piece of paper where you wrote down what it is that you sabotage and how and why and what your truth is. And let's walk through this together. Because step number 1 is being aware. So step number 1 is, what is it? What am I doing? What keeps happening? Step number 2 is, can I recognize my pattern? Can I see how it develops? What does it look like? Do I get angry and then I get frustrated and then I don't want to talk to you? Or do I get mad and then all of a sudden I go from talking normally to yelling, and then all of a sudden you're attacking me and we can't have this conversation? Does it look like I feel lonely, and when I feel lonely, I go home and I stay alone, and then the only thing that helps me is that there's food there. It gives me something to do. And I always choose the food that in essence makes me feel miserable tomorrow. Like, I want to feel miserable. Or do I go someplace that's social and drink and eat myself to death? And then step 3 is know that you are in charge of the outcomes. This is the hardest step. Know that you are in charge of the outcomes, the actions, and you consciously can decide what you want. That's what it comes down to. When you're fighting with the person that you love, and you love this person, and you don't want to fight with them, and fighting makes you feel terrible, but in that moment, they've triggered something inside of you, and then you've triggered it. And it's been like, nope, they are not going to go there. This is what's going to happen. And I'm going to go into defense mode, and then I'm going to get angry, and I'm not going to let you in. And I feel like you're going to hurt me. And then I'm going to get mad at you, and we're not going to talk. What if you realize that you were in charge of those outcomes? You're in charge of that fight. You're in charge of what happens after that. And you consciously decide, what I want is to be in love with this person and be at peace with this person. What I want is to lose 10 pounds. And this is not going to help me. It's not going to help me now. It's not going to help me tomorrow. And I have to keep making that decision. And step number 4, consciously control what you do next. You've already decided, if I want to lose 10 pounds, McDonald's is not going to help me. So what is the point of me even getting anywhere near McDonald's? Because I know what's going to happen. I know I'm going to see the sign, and it's going to trigger these mental constraints of like, this is the only food you're ever going to be able to eat when you're starving. It's the only food that's going to be able to satisfy you. So you need to go ahead and turn in and just eat it. But I know that's not going to help me. So can I consciously not go by the drive-through? When I pass the sign, can I not look at it? Can I focus somewhere else? And this is my personal key to change. This is one thing that I've found over and over and over again. And you'll hear this. I've heard this from Tony Robbins lately, and I've heard this from other gurus that I've had. And this is the one that I've seen work the most effective. Give yourself what you want to receive. Self-care is the opposite of self-sabotage. It's all what we decide we want. It's where we put our focus. If you give yourself love, if you give yourself care, if you give yourself truth, that is what you're going to receive. That is what breaks the curse. The curse is this self-sabotaging mentality that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to have the body I want, or have the mind that I want, or have the life that I want, or have the relationship that I want. I'm just not. It's not in my cards. But if you give yourself those things, if you give yourself that care and that love and that integrity, you are breaking the curse. You are changing your focus. You are putting all the control back in you as the innocent, pure being that you were before these mental constraints were assigned to you, and you accepted them. You accepted them to be true. So quite frankly, it is no one else's fault that we do this. It's not what my mom said to me. It's not what my dad said. It's not how my grandmother spoke to me. It's what I did with it. Granted, in a very young mind, it made sense that that was true because these were our authorities. These are people we looked up to. This is someone that we thought was in charge. But odds are they did not mean to do that. Odds are it had to do with their self-sabotage, their own ideas, their own glass ceilings, and we just inherited them. But you can uninherit them today by taking care of yourself. You are in control of your outcomes. You're the only one responsible for this life, your life. And you can only change yourself. But I tell you, I've seen it over and over and over again. When we begin to change our own patterns of taking care of ourselves and loving ourselves, we change the patterns of other people and how they treat us too, how they look at us, how they respond to us. It does not matter if it has been a lifetime of terror with your parents. The moment you start loving yourself more than maybe they knew how, is the moment they will see you in a very, very different way. So now it's your turn. So if you found yourself in a place that you weren't really sure, what is my pattern? What does this look like? Let's talk about that. So we have about 15 minutes left on the call. You're welcome to raise your hand with the raise your hand option on Zoom. You're welcome to just chat it in, and you can stay anonymous. If you want to be part of the call, I can pull you on video. Or if you prefer, you can also email me these questions. And I would frame it as that. Hey, I've realized this is a problem. I can't figure out my pattern. This is what I can get to. Just tell me anything you can get to. So do we have anyone that wants to come on and chat it up? Okay, so we have one example. What is the self-sabotage? What are you self-sabotaging? And it looks like I will keep you anonymous unless you tell me otherwise. Love. Self-sabotaging of love. What does that look like? Choose the wrong partner. Get disappointed. Get hurt. Sometimes cannot move on. Okay. And the why. What is the story behind this one? If you don't mind. Yep, and you can just keep typing. I'm good enough to catch them, but not good enough to keep them. I feel like people get bored or overwhelmed by me. Okay. And then what is the truth behind this? that I'm too much for people to handle. Okay. And anyone on the call can chime in on this one as well. So love is what you're looking for. What are you willing to do for this love? Anything. Yeah, most of us, right? Most of us are willing to do anything for this glass ceiling love that we know we can't get to. Of course we're willing to do anything. We're never going to be able to get to it. So anything that we do is never going to be enough because we're not actually looking for an attainable version of love because we already think that we are not going to be good enough to have this type of love. So the first thing that I would do in that scenario would be, you've already identified your pattern, right? Like you've already identified your mental constraints or that you aren't enough for this everlasting love to be a part of it. Now, let me ask you this, does that come from the rejection of fairy tales? We're convinced that these Disney fairy tales are never going to be real. You're never going to find your Prince Charming. It's never going to be that easy. Yes, that's what I thought. Yeah, and that's a lot of us. We're fed these stories of these very simple loves and they live happily ever after. What does that mean? Because none of us ever see happily ever after. So we just assume it doesn't exist. But the truth is that you create your happily ever after. You create every time you start going into your patterns, you are destroying any creation that you would have had in love. And if you think it's because you're not worth it or you're too much for them or you're not enough, well then just like with anything, then we're right. Like whatever we think, we are right. So reframing, let's go back to this reframing. Step number 1 is we want to be aware of what it is that we're doing. Like we are putting that in there. We're not going to be enough. We're going to be too much or not enough, right? Maybe we're both. Maybe it's sometimes we're too much and then sometimes we're enough. Sometimes we're crazy. And sometimes we don't have what it takes to be loved, right? That's what it comes down to. Am I too much to be loved? Am I not enough to be loved? No. You are exactly who you are and you deserve love. But how are you destroying the creation? How are you getting in your own way? Because when you see the cycle, step number 2, you identify what your pattern is. You've already done that. So step number 3, know you're in charge of those outcomes. I would go back to what it is that you're destructing and really decide what love looks like to you. What do you really want? Everlasting love, I think it's absolutely 100% possible. Is it hard? Yes. Remember, it's going to feel like you're sacrificing. It's going to feel hard. It's going to feel new. It's going to feel weird. But every moment that you consciously control what you do next, you feel yourself pulling away. You feel yourself getting intense. You feel yourself getting crazy. Speak up. Realize that you deserve love. And this is what it looks like for you. And this is what you want. Make that list of, I want a love that's like this. And then ask yourself, what am I willing to do to get it? And then open yourself to those new experiences of maybe I have to stop myself from backing up. Now, what is your new truth? That you love yourself enough to have the love you deserve. Thank you. I want you to write that down and circle it and put it on your mirror, because this is a reminder. You've got to consciously go back to it. And until it's ingrained in us and it becomes an automated, until it overcomes the curse that we are trying to lift. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, looks like we got some people who need to log off, which is fine. You are welcome to email me. I want to thank everybody for sticking around and going through this webinar with us. I know it's a lot of information in a short amount of time. I'd love to be more interactive with everyone. So everybody that's on these Zoom calls, email me, text me. Let's get on a free call together. Let's just explore. What kind of strategies can we come up with to help you get out of your self-sabotage habits? I have to do it every day. Me and my mirror are really good friends. So next Tuesday, 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, our theme is activating the most potent existence strategies. Activating the most potent existence strategies. So we will go over the other two anchors of health, movement and growth, and mindfulness and successful thinking. I hope to see you then. If for some reason you cannot make it, just please email me or text me and I will send you the files. Again, you can still get the full series even if you've missed any part of it. These are all recorded. Just go to www.seedoflifecollective.com. And thank you so much for joining today. I'm Melody Rogers, your host, and I'll see you next time.